Hello and welcome to Atelier Sandrine Moji. In today's video I am going to test some new brushes that are made by Panart, and they are a synthetic brush. As you probably know by now, I only use synthetic brush. I do not use animal hair in my brushes. And I'm going to test them in a painting. So what do I look at when I test a brush? First I look at the aesthetics of it, how it looks like. I know technically it's not important, but I do like to use a pretty brush. I do like to look at my brushes, and if a brush is beautiful, it adds something. I wouldn't use a brush just because it's beautiful. If it's a rubbish brush, I'm not going to use it, even if it's the most beautiful brush in the world. But I do rate them on this because I find it important personally. I'm also going to rate them on the spring. I like my brushes to spring back. When I lift my brush from the paper, I like it to spring back rather than stay folded. How much paint they carry, if they go back to a nice point, if they feel good in the hand, if they balance well, and generally how pleasant they are to use. So you will see those more closely when I start painting with them, but right from the beginning I can tell you these are actually the most beautiful brushes I've ever seen. They are made of densified wood in layers of indigo and green and natural wood color. I will show them to you more closely when the camera is over my table. But they are absolutely beautiful, and because they are made from this laminated wood, they're all different. No two are the same. The ferrule is made of nickel plated brass, and the filament is silver in color, and it is a synthetic filament. Now I'm going to start painting with them. So I'm going to use a Patreon project that I've been working on, which is some rose hips in front of some ginkgo leaves. And on Patreon this is a written tutorial, not a video tutorial. So I'm going to film using those brushes and then use the step-by-step photos for my tutorial on Patreon. Are you ready? Let's go. Let's have a closer look at the brush. On a white background you'll see better. So like I said, the handle is made of densified wood, so you can see the stripes where the wood has been densified and then cut and then polished and then varnished. And as you can see, they're all the same assortment of colors, but the colors are in a different place depending on the brush. I've got a good assortment of sizes, so I should be able to try all of these. Silver ferrule, which is actually nickel plated brass, and grey filament. Now we're going to see when I start using them if the grey filament stain or if the paint washes off and they stay grey. They feel really well balanced in the hand, so I quite like holding them. And I think the ones I'm going to use the most for the painting are the number 6 and the number 0. So the number 6 is a very small 6. For example, this one is a number 6 as well, and you can see this one is a lot smaller. There is no international standard for the size of brushes, so every manufacturer has got their own sizing system, but that doesn't really matter. Once you know that, you just buy the brushes that you need. This is a 16. See, compared to this one, this is a 12. So the numbers are quite low. Right, let's do some painting. I'm going to start with the number 6 here to wet the paper. And then I'm going to paint with the number 0. Ideally, I'd quite like to have a number 2, really. They have a very good spring. You can see when I put my brush down and I lift it, that they spring right back up. But that's not unexpected. Synthetic brushes, one of the reasons that I like them is because they generally have a good spring. They also carry a decent amount of paint, but at the same time they don't flood the paper, which is really important as well. When you work wet in wet, like I do, you don't want your brushes to carry so much paint that as soon as you put them on the paper, everything gets flooded. You do need some level of control. Now, the hair is longer than what I'm used to, so it's a lot thinner at the tip than what I used to. That's gonna take some getting used to as well. Some people like to work with really long hair. I tend to prefer shorter hair. So I'm working here with a mix of Pyrrole Scarlet, these are Daniel Smith watercolors, Pyrrole Scarlet, Pyrrole Red and Carmine. So they are separate on my palette. I've got the Scarlet, the Red and the Carmine, and I mix them straight on the paper. Okay, now let's try to do a little bit of dry brush work. So without wetting the paper first, I'm loading the brush with some burnt umber and I'm going straight in. Again, the hair is a little bit longer than what I'm used to, but it is very, very fine at the tip. So for little details like this, it's working very well. The brushes I use normally are shorter, but the tip isn't as fine as this one. And for tiny details like this, that fine tip comes in very useful. Now I'm going to do a second wash on the rose hip to see if it lifts the paint with a second wash wet in wet, or if the paint stays in place and the brush doesn't lift it. If brushes are too scratchy, they just lift washes rather than adding more color. And when you re-wet, you run the risk of lifting what's already there and then adding more color in my range of reds. So it hasn't lifted what I did before, and the washes are layering really nicely. So it's done a very smooth couple of washes, which is very good. As far as softness is concerned, it's not the softest of brushes, but it is softer than my hardest brush. So it's somewhere in the middle. I would say it's probably similar to the ProArt Proline Plus 007, which is actually the brush that I'm using the most. So medium softness, not as soft as the Princeton, softer than the Da Vinci. If I were to rate them in softness, it would go like this: Princeton, Proline, Panart, and Da Vinci. These two in the middle being quite similar. So medium softness, great spring. So I'm gonna paint a little bit more with these and then I will come back to you to let you know what I thought overall. I have finished testing the brushes, I have finished my painting, and I have marked the brushes like I always do out of 100. So I have 5 areas of marking: the feel of the brush, the performance, the characteristics, and the logistics, which is more things like price and easy to get hold of and things like this. And in all these categories, every mark is out of 5, and together, as there's 20 of them, they make a mark out of 100. So let's start with the feel. The first one is how much does the brush feels like a real sable. And for this one, I have given 2 out of 5 because it doesn't pretend to be a sable, really. It's too stiff. When you touch it, it's very smooth. It doesn't have the softness, but it has the smoothness, but too stiff to be a sable. And then the point. The point has 5 out of 5. It is one of the sharpest brushes I have. Then the capacity, how much paint does the brush carry? I have 3 out of 5. Then the softness, is it scratchy or is it soft? So the softest would be 5 out of 5, the scratchiest would be 0, and this is a 3, so it's quite soft, but not the softest I have. There's also the look of the painting once I've finished with it. Because sometimes you can have a brush that you find easy to work with, but actually once the painting is finished, you think, I don't know, my painting would have looked better if I had painted it with another brush. And for this, I have 4 out of 5, as I'm quite happy with the results. But you have to keep in mind that with any painting, normally I would use different types of brushes. I wouldn't do a whole painting with only one brush. I would start with a stiffer one like this one and would finish with a softer brush for the glazes. This painting I painted entirely with this one, which is quite unusual for me. And then there's the performance. The first criteria is wet in wet. How easy is it to paint wet in wet with a brush? And for this I have 4 out of 5. And then the dry brush technique, how is it when I don't wet the paper first, but just go straight on the paper with the paint? And for that I have 5 out of 5, because thanks to that very good point, I could go into details with the dry brush, and even working with dry brush technique, I didn't get any brush marks on the paper. Then there's the quality of the washes. Are the washes even? And for that I have 4 out of 5. Then there's the detail work. Is it messy or is it very precise? That's 5 out of 5. I got a lot of precision out of that brush. And then there's the glazing. So the glazing are very thin wet washes that I do on top of other ones as a last touch to sort of modify the color slightly. And here I've done 2 out of 5, because for glazing this is not the best brush because of the stiffness. I then have the danger of scratching the previous washes rather than adding more paint to it. For glazing you need something softer than this. Then the characteristics, there's the style. As you know, I really like the look of that brush. If I could, I would give 6 out of 5, but the mathematical side of my brain will not let me do this, so 5 out of 5. And then there's the resistance, how strong it feels. According to the manufacturer, because this is densified wood, it's actually stronger than normal wood. But I must say, I don't really break my brushes on a regular basis. If I were the Djokovic of botanical art and I was prone to get my anger on my brushes and snap them when I'm not happy with what I've done, then this would be a plus. This brush is unbreakable. Then there's the bristle quality, and I've put 4 out of 5 there. And then the balance, ergonomics. So when I hold my brush, does it balance well? How does it feel in the hand? And that's a 5 out of 5. It's got a beautiful shape and it balances really well in the hand. Then there's a bristle staining. I do not like when the bristle in my brushes stay colored once I clean my brush, and some bristles do that. On this one I have used blue, red, green, and I don't know if you can see this on camera, but it's not quite as silvery as the one that I haven't used. So that's a 3 out of 5. Not 0, because when I wet the brush and I put it on the paper, there is no color coming out. So it's not going to affect the colors that I'm going to paint later. It's just slightly stained the silver filaments. And the last characteristic is the spring. When I put the brush down on the paper, does it bounce back or does it stay all floppy and bent? And this is 5 out of 5. It's a very springy brush, which I love. And then there's the logistics. The size range, there's a very good range from the smallest to some very large ones. The sizing is smaller than all the other brushes I have, but there is a very good range, so in the end it doesn't matter. The value. This is one of the most expensive synthetic brushes that I have tried. At the moment I can't seem to find in the UK anyway any place where I could buy them individually, but a set of 3 in Jackson's Art Supply would be £18, so roughly £6 per brush. The cheapest ones I've tested are more around £3 and the more expensive around £7, apart from one that was £20. I still don't really know why. But having said that, it is such a beautiful brush that I would be willing to pay a little bit more to have that lovely stripy wood that you get with it. So 4 out of 5 for the value. And then there's the availability. I have found them in a couple of shops online, but the range is very limited. I have found nowhere when you can buy them individually. So even if it's possible, it's not easy to find. So availability, 3 out of 5. And then the overall impression. After I've done all these criteria, after I've handled the brush, after I've gazed at it for a while, my overall impression is 4 out of 5. I really like the brush. I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep a few sizes in my brush pot. So this is my official brush pot. You can see I use lots of different brushes. And these ones will join them. I will definitely use them on a regular basis. And the overall mark out of 100 is 83, which is very, very good. There's only one brush in all the ones that I have tested that was slightly higher than that. So there we go. That was the Panart Densified Wood Synthetic Watercolor Brush. I hope that was useful. Don't hesitate, go for it. It's a really good brush and sure to be admired wherever you go. I'll see you soon in another video. Happy painting, bye!